The word innovation, the great German philosopher and psychotherapist Erich Fromm once famously said, Jesus and Karl Marx have something in common. Everyone talks about them, but no one's read them. You know, and this is a little bit with the word innovation as well. Innovation gets thrown around loosely as a term, but what exactly does it mean? What exactly does innovation mean? And what I like to do is when I ask myself what a term means, I like to go to the etymological root of the word. The question, where does this word originate from? And the word innovation originates from the Latin innovare, and it means, at the root of it, to bring the new into the established. We're not talking about radical transformation of reality, we'll change everything. No, we're talking about little acts of bringing the new into the established. Sounds easy enough, doesn't it? Could you give me the next slide? To visualize this, what does this include, to bring the new to the established? What it includes is, let's assume we have a status quo, how something is right now. In order to be able to bring the new into the established, we'll have to challenge the status quo. Easy, right? We have to look at it and say, what's not right here? What could be better here? What could be different here and beneficial for us, right? And then once we've challenged it and we've uncovered things that could be better, things that should be different maybe, then we go ahead and we evolve it. We evolve our state into a new state. Easy enough, isn't it? Do you agree? Who agrees this is easy? Who does this on a daily basis? Who thinks this is easy? Can I see a show of hands? Nobody. Very good. You guys understand me? Is the translator a bit slow? Good. Guys, this seems easy enough, but actually for us humans, it's not easy at all. Why? Because we are physiologically primed to have a problem with that. We are physiologically primed to have a problem with it. There's more than 4 issues there, but I want to show you 4 fundamental challenges that we as human beings have with this process. Yeah? And this is true for all of us, so see if you recognize yourself in it again. Could I have the next slide? So let's start with the first one. We are primed to emphasize or prioritize instant gratification. What does that mean? That means we have a real challenge in challenging the status quo if the status quo serves us, if it's positive for us. You understand this? Why would I bite the hand that feeds me? Why would I bite the hand that feeds me? But here's the interesting thing. The status quo doesn't even have to be that beneficial. It's enough if it's just a little bit beneficial. If we get something out of it, then it's enough for us to want to keep it up and running. Why is this? Because we are neurologically primed to emphasize short-term rewards. So if we have the choice between something long-term and something short-term, neurologically, we are primed. That means we have the tendency towards choosing the short-term reward. Why is that? Because every time we receive a reward, there's a dopamine hit. There's dopamine being released in our brain. As this dopamine is being released, dopamine is connected to the brain network that governs emotions in our body. So when dopamine gets released, emotions get released, they come up, and these emotions anchor the experience of something positive having happened to us right there and then. And here's the interesting thing. When emotions come up, there's a network in our brain that is responsible for emotions, and there's a network in our brain that is responsible for rational thinking. When the emotional network is active, the rational network cannot be, right? Because they're antagonistic. That means one is active, the other one cannot be. Can you see this vicious cycle? If you ever wondered why people stay in abusive relationships, now you know. Because there could be one piece of sugar in this bitter meal, and that piece of sugar linked up with the dopamine hit, linked up with that positive emotion, for that second overrides our rational understanding of, damn, I have to get out of this. So this is very interesting when we want to challenge the status quo, because if we get something out of the status quo, we tend to try to keep it as it is in order to get our hits. So that's challenge number 1, right? Challenge number 2 is we have an inherent inertia to executing new actions. Have you guys heard of the comfort zone before? Yes? Somebody? Thank you for that answer. Very nice. Yeah? The comfort zone, we all heard of it. Has anyone experienced the comfort zone in this room? Yeah? A few honest people, and the rest is not awake yet. Very good. Yeah? Okay, so the comfort zone really, why is it it's actually the wrong term for it, because the comfort zone is not comfortable often. The comfort zone is just habitual. That means we're used to it, so we're keeping it up. Why is that? Why is it hard for us to get out of what we're used to? Because we're neurologically primed to avoid new actions. What does that mean? We're neurologically primed to avoid new actions. Why? Because the brain receives, this is a true fact, the brain receives around 11 million bits of information per second from our sensory body. So our body, touch, taste, smell, intuition, etc., sends around 11 million, on average, 11 million bits per second into our brain. Our conscious mind, your conscious awareness, the thing that we're interacting with right now, our conscious awareness can handle 40 to 50 bits per second. What does that mean for you? We miss a whole bunch of stuff. How does the brain decide which information to pick up? It decides which information to pick up and which information to keep unconscious on the basis of the patterns it already recognizes. You understand this? Right? So if I have a tendency to focus on things that are bad around me, tendency is that I will notice the things that are bad around me. Why? Because the brain selectively chooses the information that's required to keep it going. Why? Because the brain chooses the lowest path of resistance. It wants to preserve the most energy possible. And here's the wicked thing now. Our perception is not a passive process. It's not something where we sit and we take in information and we process. It's actually a proactive process. That means we project our assumptions and our patterns into reality in order to be able to deal with it, right? And in this process of building this habit seeking, the seeking for habits, we actually have a network in our brain. It's called the limbic network. And that network, its only job is to turn on when we want to do something new in order to keep us from doing it. It's called limbic friction. You know this one when you say, I should go to the gym. Later. You know the energy? That little thing that goes, later, that's your limbic system triggering in your brain and creating limbic friction to say, leave it because it's not something we're used to, so let's not go there, right? The third challenge we have is, once we've challenged the status quo, once we identified what there is to change, we start moving, now suddenly we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty because we don't know where it's going to go. We're leaving the known hub, we're moving towards something new. And here again, we all, and I hope you recognize this, we all have a natural tendency to resist uncertainty. Why is that? Because again, we're neurologically primed to resist uncertainty. I just talked about this pattern recognition process and this process of perception and projection. The brain wants, when you're walking down the street and you're looking over the street and you see, is there a car or not? You might think you see what you're seeing, but actually you're seeing kind of what your brain's telling you to see. Have you guys ever seen that video of 8, 9 people passing balls to each other, and you're supposed to, it's a study from the MIT, I think, on YouTube. You're supposed to count the number of passes that are being played. You've seen it? Yeah? What happens in that video? Exactly. Exactly. You're watching these people passing balls to each other, jumping from one spot to another, and I remember watching this thinking, easy, I can count this, because I used to play basketball, you know, so I can count flying balls. And I'm counting the passes, and they asked me how many passes was it, and I was like, easy, 38. Okay, but did you see the monkey that just walked through the image? And literally, what happens in this image, in this video is, a dude in a monkey costume walks right through the middle, turns once and dances, and then walks out of the image again. And the reason why we don't see it is because we're priming our brain, we're saying, I need to see the passes that are happening. And so we miss the monkey walking through. Because our brain basically filters out all the stuff that we are not used to, right? So now imagine you're giving this system a situation where you say, nothing here is what you know it to be. It freaks out, okay? And lastly, innovation, challenging the status quo, and moving forward is hard for us because when we start to do things differently, we risk being excluded from the groups that are doing things the way they're doing them now. And this, to us, is a real problem. Why? Because we are, guess what? neurologically primed to fear exclusion. Think about this for a second from an evolutionary point of view. From an evolutionary point of view. In the past 250,000, 300,000 years, exclusion from our peer group meant almost certain death for humanity. Because we're not a lion, we're not a tiger, we're not an elephant, we're pretty vulnerable creatures, and our strength comes out of the group. So we are physiologically primed to avoid being excluded from a group. This is actually so intense in our physiological priming that the area in the brain that triggers when we think of being excluded from a group is the same area that triggers when we experience fear of death. So in a way, when we start to innovate, what some of us experience is a fear of death, right? And you have to be aware of this. How many business owners, managers in the room? Can I see a show of hands, actually? Okay, academics? Yeah, you're all of it, wonderful. Very good. Okay, students? Nobody, very good. So you need to be aware of this when you ask your students or your employees to do things differently. This is super challenging for them, okay? So what to do then? Should we just leave it behind? Should we just let it be? Here's the interesting thing. I told you that neurologically we're primed towards these things. And this is true. But we're not stuck with these things. Why? Because the human being and the human body is not mechanical. We are organic. We're dynamic creatures. Our greatest ability is adaptation. And what we do is we adapt to our environment. So what can we do to overcome these challenges? What we can do is can I have the next slide? Yeah. What we can do is we can design environments that help us overcome this neurological priming. In other words, we can leverage environmental factors that attenuate, that weaken our biological response to the risk that represents innovation and facilitate our overcoming of these limitations.